Well, good afternoon, Richardson area Democrats. I'm gonna be like Bill Maher for a second, a little bit like Bill Maher. I'm not funny and I'm not that edgy, but I know why you're happy today. It's good to see everybody. What a difference a week makes. What a difference every week these days makes, right? Sounds like everybody is fired up. I'm glad that you're all here today. I'm seeing a lot of new faces. How many people have never been here before? That is really good to see. And I'm going to tell you that last time we got together, we were over at Four Bullets. It was our happy hour a week and a half ago, which seems like about a lifetime or so ago. And we were talking about this same issue, voting rights, and we were giving people the opportunity to get involved, to sign up to work at elections, either as a poll worker or a poll watcher. And if you're interested in that today, if you didn't get a chance to sign up last time, or if we convince you today that it's something you want to do, we have a way for you to sign up and get more information. It gives you that opportunity to find out more about working. But I'm going to tell you that last time we had a good crowd about this size, and out of that number of people, we had 17 people their name on the list to work the election. So that is like people are getting excited, people are getting engaged, and this week has just been like off the charts. I don't even know the numbers. They're changing so fast about how much money is being raised, the excitement about people actually now saying they're going to vote. They're excited about the people that are on the ticket, and we only know one new one that's probably going to be on the ticket. Still looking for that vice president pick. So it's exciting times, very exciting times. Today we are, as you know, speaking about voting rights again. And before we have our speakers come up, I wanted to introduce at least one person, and I don't know if there's somebody else that wants to speak for another candidate. Are there any actual candidates running for anything besides Tina? Tina, I know you are. Okay, well, Tina, I want Tina to come on up. She is a judge now and going to be running for, you're surprising me. I didn't know that you were still running for something. So I'm going to let her tell you what she's running for. We haven't seen each other in a while.
I know. It feels like an eternity. Yes. It really does. So, first of all, the first thing I need to do is say thank you. The primaries came, the primaries went. I am running for the 5th District Court of Appeals, Place 9, and so I'm still on the ballot. The reason why I am here today, other than the fact that I want to hear our amazing speaker today, is that I do want to talk to you about the importance of talking to your neighbors, your families, and anyone that you are knocking on the door of about judicial races. And let me explain why. I'm going to try to make this as fast as possible, but remember your Civics 101. You have the executive branch, and we are excited about what's happening with our executive ticket, right? Yes, absolutely. That is the first chair in your stool. The second chair is your legislative branch, right? So that's state as well as federal. So we've got 32 that's in this area, 24 that's in this area. We also have a lot of state houses and state seats that we are very interested in flipping. And so that is your second seat stool, right? That's the second leg of that stool. And if you stopped there, I promise you, even though you could totter around for a little bit, that stool's going to flip over and you're going to be on your tickets, right? And the reason why is because in government, there is a third leg to that stool that makes that stool steady. That is your judiciary. It is the third branch of government, and it has to be an independent branch. What Donald Trump would like to do is start pulling all those others into one little seat and a little leg with no others, right? Government doesn't work that way. In Texas, Paxton has taken out some of his own Republican judges in order to threaten the rest of the judiciary to tell them to toe the line on their decisions. And so the independence of the judiciary is at risk with the Republican Party. And by the way, come and talk to me, but he knocked out 3 of the highest judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals in primaries, wiped them out over by 60% with challengers. And he did that to let them know that when he wants a certain power, that when the court rules against them, he's going to take them out. And the message was heard all across Texas. So if you want to make sure that government works for the people, you have to have a 3-legged stool with good people in each of those branches. So here's what a Democrat told me this morning when I was block walking. I didn't know that there were judges on the ballot, and I skipped them. So we have to tell people why it's important that we vote. And by the way, I don't care who the Democrat is. Every last Democrat is better than the Republican on the list. So anybody who tells me I need to know more, that's my line. Every Democrat on that ballot of yours deserves your vote. So please, let's talk about these issues. If you need talking points while you're block walking, let me help you. If there's anything I can do to help you not have people skip judges, because it is in all of our interests. You let me do everything I can to give you those talking points. RAD, you're fabulous. Thank you for having me.
Well, I was just talking to one of our board members earlier, Johnette, and she had an example, story she wanted to tell you. So come on up here.
Okay, well, Tina kind of said this a minute ago, but I'll reiterate it a little bit. And that's, what can we do to move the ball? And who's here seen Bridgerton? A few of us. Okay. A little small one over here. I see you. Okay, so do you remember the scene in Bridgerton where the mom is, this is taking place during like Jane Austen, England, for some context. And the mom is working with her daughter because they don't want her to have to marry this terrible suitor. And they're trying to solve the problem at a time when women had very little power over their lives. And so the mom says, here's the solution. We're going to do what women do best. We're going to talk. So that's what I was telling Jenny, and she wanted me to tell you that story because that's what we need to do. We need to reach out to our network, our friends, our family, and share directly the great story of all of these wonderful candidates, including Kamala. Woo-woo! And just share some information, and I have a small example of that. There was someone who had come over to our house to do some repair work, and I shared a video with that person, and I just showed it to them on my phone. And so they did what they were supposed to do, and they were about to leave, and they came back and they said, will you forward that to me? So it works, is all I'm saying. So thank you, and I hope you will get out there and talk to your people.
Thank you. Well, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the program. And I'm actually going to start with Alison Grinter Allen. She is a civil rights attorney and has been very successful in helping some people who were wrongfully convicted. And one of those people is here today, and we'll hear from Crystal in just a minute. But Alison, come on up and talk to us.
Okay, so everybody so far has started off by telling you that what Tina has told you is correct, and I'm not going to be the first one to drop that ball, because this is a story with a villain, and it's a story with several villains, I'm afraid. In Texas, everybody knows, it's not just us, everybody knows that Texas is one of the next states to flip over. Texas is going to be blue. It is not a question. That is happening. And a lot of people have a lot at stake to delay that. And it seems that they've decided on a way to do that. One of those ways is to really appeal to the voters with policies and issues that people care. I'm just kidding. No. The way they're going to do it is by suppressing the vote. And one of the easiest ways to suppress the vote is to politicize the criminal justice system. We all remember the day that Dobbs came down. And it's been a horrible, dangerous, terrible thing for everybody across the state. But in Dallas County, we're not really worried about things like people investigating miscarriages. We're not worried about things like people accessing our health data in order to prosecute women. We have every reason to worry. However, we've protected ourselves by voting in the folks who enforce our laws. We have voted in a DA who has said there are bigger priorities than messing around with women, and what he is saying is there are bigger priorities, but what we need to hear is we're not doing that in Dallas County. We have voted in judges who are not gonna have it. We have a whole system that we have elected and who are accountable to us. And that has angered one particular man who is so hot about it that he just booted out 3 of his statewide judges. A decision came down a couple of years ago called Stevens, where the Court of Criminal Appeals said that the Attorney General cannot just go into the blue areas and prosecute people himself without the permission, without the sign-on of the local DA. He was so mad about that. And one of the reasons he's mad about that is that his absolute plan is to go through Dallas County's voter rolls, to go through Harris County's voter rolls, Travis County's voter rolls, and scrape together as many people as he could to make a case that voter fraud exists, when we know that it doesn't. In-person voter fraud is not a thing. In a county with 2 million people, are there a couple of folks who have made mistakes on forms? Yes. Is there voter fraud? No. But if you don't care about facts and you don't care about numbers and all you want to do is scare people, then what you can do is cobble together people who have made mistakes to plaster them up and scare the public into believing that if you make any error, if you don't dot an I or cross a T, that you will be prosecuted. And the lesson to that is don't vote. It's not worth your time. In 2018, I met Crystal Mason. She had just been convicted in Tarrant County of illegal voting. She had been sentenced by a judge there in Tarrant County to 5 years in prison for casting a provisional ballot while she was on supervised release after a federal sentence. When I met Crystal, she was shaken, obviously. She was a mother. She had just been told by the government that she was going to have to spend 5 years in an unair-conditioned, that's another problem, state prison, to be ripped away from her kids for casting a provisional ballot in an election where she thought she was eligible to vote. She told me, and she told everybody, I will never vote again. We started her appeal, and Crystal started to understand the power of her story. She started to understand what her story meant to the people of Tarrant County. And let me tell you what the story means to the people of Tarrant County. Everyone on a house-to-house level had heard about Crystal's story, had heard about she was on parole or probation or something like that, not sure, and she cast a provisional ballot. I didn't know that was against the rules, but evidently it is. And she's going to prison for it. Tarrant County is a county with just about as many people as Dallas County has. And it's a county with more black and brown folks than white voters. But it is the very last red urban county in the country. And they are holding on by their fingernails to keep it that way. And scaring people away from the voting booth is the only way they could get it done. I'm happy to go into the legalities of the appeal of that situation, but I want to let you meet Crystal and hear from her what it was like to be arrested for casting a provisional ballot, what it was like to go through the process, what it was like to actually get brought back to prison on the back of an allegation that eventually the appellate courts have decided was not even really a crime. At this point, Crystal has been acquitted of illegal voting. She is not going back. Thank you. As well she should. It was a 6-year-long fight. It was political in ways nobody knew it was going to be. And it was scary as hell for Crystal and her family. But hopefully it is completely over, and the new rollout of ways to mess with and scare people we can look forward to in the fall. But I'm going to kick this over to Crystal. Crystal Mason, who when I first met her said she would never vote again, and who now has registered more people to vote than anybody I know, who brings her whole family with her, and who has made everyone become a deputy voter registrar. Ladies and gentlemen, Crystal Mason. Hello.
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for having me out here. I kind of wrote things down. I got to pull it up. Kind of wrote things down because when I tell my story, you know, it's still emotional. So I want to read some things that I wrote down. So, you know, bring it I'm sorry. Okay, so I was sentenced to 5 years for illegally voting for filling out a provisional ballot that never counted. In 2016, I submitted a provisional ballot. February 2017, Tarrant County indicted me for illegally voting. April 2018, I was arrested and charged with illegally voting. Going to prison that day, I had requested an appeals bond, and I was out on an appeal bond. September 2018, I was sent back to federal prison to do 10 months. I was on something called supervised release, and that new conviction violated me, so I had to go back to prison. Still out on the appeal bond. March 2024, I was acquitted from all charges. So I was out for 6 years on the appeal bond. In April 2024, the DA filed to reverse my acquittal. So I'm out, but we're still at the criminal courts of appeal waiting on the final decision to either let me stay free or if I have to go back. So just imagine when you're thinking you're free and you're going back to face the same thing. You could possibly be going back to face the same thing. So I started my organization. When I went back to prison, I did 10 months, the hardest 10 months of my life. And especially when you tell your kids, your family, that you'll never leave them again and then have to go back and return back to prison. And that's when I had to realize that I'm doing exactly what they want me to do, because the first thing I did when I got on TV was say, I'll never vote again. If I can go to prison for filling out a provisional ballot that I never went and redeemed or anything, I'll never vote again. I would never do this to hurt my kids or anything, you know. I would never do this again. That's exactly what I was saying, and I was telling the world. And at that time when I stepped out, I said, that's not what I want them to know about me. That's not what I believe. I've been voting for a long time. My mom started us voting at 18. So I started the organization Crystal Mason to Fight Against Voter Suppression. And I started that organization to educate and keep people aware of how important it is to vote. You got to remember that what happened to me, the judge, the DA, the prosecutor, they're all elected officials. So this is why I encourage people to go and vote. Because if we vote, we can make sure somebody's up there to do the right thing. So that's my story, and I am so happy to have Alison as one of my attorneys on here. I mean, she's been there with me to fight and cry through this whole thing. I almost thought she was going to jail with me. No, for real. The federal courthouse with McBride, I mean, she was a bulldog, and I just was looking like, we're about to go to jail. But she fought through, and I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful that God placed her, Kim Cole, Justin Moore, Texas Civil Rights, ACLU, all in my position for my case, you know. I'm just so grateful to have that, you know, because if not, I would be in prison today, you guys, you know. So this is why I want to tell you guys it is so important to vote. This election especially. So if you're not registered, if you know anybody that's not registered, I'm deputized in Tarrant County, Dallas County, Denton County. Yeah. So you guys let me know, and I got my stuff in the car if I need to register.
So I know we're going to take questions, but I have the privilege of being able to take the microphone from you and ask you the first question. So I haven't seen you I haven't seen anybody in a couple of weeks. I've been on vacation. It was lovely. Thank you for asking. Yes. But now that we're back, it's obviously a different world. People are energized, have a new passion for voting. A lot more people are coming out to vote. Some people have said that Kamala Harris is maybe not as trustworthy because she was a prosecutor. What do you think about that?
My opinion is we need somebody that's going to really do the job. And I feel like if Biden passed the baton to her, then I believe in her. And that's what we need to do.
I've been a criminal defense attorney for, too many years. And I've known a lot of prosecutors, and you've known a lot of prosecutors, because a lot of prosecutors have come on to your team, and a lot of people who have prosecuted, and a lot of U.S. attorneys and folks have written amicus briefs for you. We've seen a lot of prosecutors who care about the job and care about the country. And I think that being a prosecutor, and just small private to Tiffany and Tina, if you tell anyone I said this, I will deny it. I think being a prosecutor is a really good test of how people use government power and whether they're going to abuse it and hurt people with the power of the government or not. If folks are responsible with that power, they have shown that they understand the impact of the government. And so, in my opinion, again, omerta, my friends, being a prosecutor is one of her best qualities, because it shows that she is going to use the power of government to, and this might be a shock to everybody who's been alive for the last 6 years, help people? Make things better? I don't know. What do you think?
I absolutely agree with that.
Albert Roberts, who did the Lord's work running against Sharon Wilson, who prosecuted Crystal, has been one of the chief cheerleaders for progressive prosecution and how it can save people's lives, especially in Texas. All right. But let's have some questions if you have any.
Wait.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually going to let Louis talk, and then the three of you can answer some questions, okay? So, before we get any further, I do want to say thank you to Dan Barrios, Councilman Dan Barrios, who is here today. Always good to see him. But we are very excited to have Louis Bedford come today. He is the voter protection director. Is that how you say it?
Called me a voter protection attorney.
A voter protection attorney for the Dallas County Democratic Party. I got his notice about that, or saw somebody talking about it, and immediately reached out to him. This was earlier this summer, and I was like, I don't know how we're going to get you up here, what we're going to get you up here for, but like, stand by. And so as soon as I called him, he said, well, I'm in Europe first, but I'll be back and I'll be happy to come and talk. So thank you so much for coming and talking with us today.
Hello, everyone. I am very happy to be here, and I just want to first and foremost say thank you to the Richardson area Democrats for allowing me to be able to speak today. So thank you to all of you. So first and foremost, I'm not really great speaking with a microphone. I don't really know what to do with my hands. So if you see me start doing this just a little bit, like I'm juggling the microphone, just know that it's only because I'm used to speaking with my hands. But more than anything else, I do want to say voting is incredibly difficult in the state of Texas. It is. But there is a reason behind that, and it's intentional. The reality is this is a very partisan state. And because it is partisan, they want to use different mechanisms that are in place to be able to attack people where they are, to be able to prevent people from voting, and to be able to make this process as confusing as possible, to make people want to give up, to make people want to say, I don't want to vote again. But the reality is, this isn't just at the voting booth. This happens way before that. This happens at the redistricting level. So every 10 years we go through a census. And after we have the census, there's a redistricting process where the state of Texas and counties decide to partition out how do we want our districts to look. And that's everything from the city council districts, commissioner court districts, state representatives, state senators, congressional districts. All of those go through the redistricting process. But the reality is, in the state of Texas, the party that is in political power is also the party that decides what those districts are going to look like. And I know we've spoken a little bit about Tarrant County today, but I want to be able to provide everyone with a concrete example of what redistricting looks like at the state level. So during the blue wave, Senator Beverly Powell, who was a state senator in Tarrant County, ended up being elected. And her state senate district was wholly in Tarrant County. It was a coalition district where black people and Hispanic people ended up voting for the candidate of their choice, and that ended up being Beverly Powell. But after the redistricting process, that district is no longer just in Tarrant County. That district is now all the way out in Johnson County, halfway down to Waco as well. That's what the district looks like now. But that is how the people in the state have used their political power to be able to say, you know what, we might have one too many Democrats in the state Senate. We might have one too many of this here. We might have one too many of that there. And it is all intentional. But that's why it's very important for us to be able to continue to speak up, to use our voice in order to make sure that not only our voices are heard, but we're able to have power in a system that tries to make us all powerless. That is the reality of it. And that's just redistricting. Now let's just talk a little bit more about the voting process. Whether it's even trying to register to vote, that is difficult. Whether it's trying to even vote by mail. Not only do we need to cast an application to be able to get a mail ballot, but whenever we're filling out a mail ballot, we also need to put an identification number on it to be able to make sure that the ballot can also be counted. But picture this, if we put the wrong identification number on the ballot, that will also be a reason why the ballot won't be counted. But once again, there's a reason, there is a purpose behind why all of this is in place. There's a reason and purpose for it. It's because if we are confused, we may say, you know what, I don't want to do this. This is too hard. The lines at my polling location are too long. It's a little bit too difficult for me to be able to access the machines, the information that I need to be able to go vote. That is what people are facing on a daily basis. And that's just a registration process. And then we have the actual ability to be able to cast a ballot and have it be counted. Whether it's confusion or the intentional misinformation about trying to cast a provisional ballot that impacts people, that scares people. As we've just heard, it scares people. But that's the purpose of what's being done. To be able to use people, to be able to hold them up and say, look at what you shouldn't be, when the reality is we are all human. We make mistakes, but not only do we make mistakes, we're trying to make the world a better place for ourselves and for our families. But that is what the state of Texas is actually trying to take away from us. They're trying to take away our rights to be able to vote, trying to take our rights to be able to have a choice in not only what happens with our bodily autonomy, but what books kids are able to read in schools. Books. Trying to say a book is political. Trying to say that knowledge is not power. Knowledge is something that we need to be scared of. Knowledge is something that threatens me, because the reality is, the more knowledge people have, the less likely they are to be manipulated. The less likely they are for somebody to be able to tell them what they should or what they should not do. But that's the focus, that's the point of all of this. This is not just a singular effort to be able to focus on voting. This is also to be able to focus on voting and our health care, our education. This is the focus, to be able to make sure that the state of Texas knows and the state of Texas is able to tell us what our value is. Because the reality is also this, if the state of Texas cared about each and every one of us, our power grid system wouldn't look the way that it does. Our healthcare system wouldn't be what it is. Our roads wouldn't be what they are. There's a reason why it is easier to find transportation in certain communities in Dallas County and not in others. But once again, this is an all-encompassing effort. There is a focus in order to be able to divide us. And the reason why we cannot be divided is because freedom is on the ballot. It's not just democracy that's on the ballot, it's freedom. It's the freedom to be who we are, to love who we love, to be who we want to be. That is what is on the ballot. That is why we need to do everything we possibly can to show up and show out to make sure that the people who have our values in mind are able to be elected. Because the reality is also this, and I'm going to be honest with you. If we don't speak up, somebody else will. And the reality is that person is not going to have our best interests at heart. That person is not going to care about the things that we care about. That person is just going to say, what power can I have? What authority can I push? What is something that I can take away from somebody else rather than what can I give to someone else? That's where we are. And so with that, I also want to make a call to each and every one of you. If you haven't already gotten involved, get involved. Whether it's volunteering with the Texas Democratic Party or volunteering with the Dallas County Democratic Party, there are ways for you to be able to get involved. There are ways for you to be able to show up. If you want to be a poll worker, to be an election clerk or an election judge, there are opportunities for you to be able to do so. If you want to be a poll watcher, not the Republican poll watchers that they say can influence and people who want to watch for irregularities that are happening in Dallas County. It is funny to note that a lot of those irregularities that they point out are happening in black and brown neighborhoods, but it is what it is. But if you want to be able to show up and be able to volunteer, be able to dedicate your time, there are opportunities for you to be able to do so. So please, if you want to be involved, make sure you reach out to me, make sure you reach out to the Richardson Area Democrats leadership, because that is what we need. We need a buy-in from everyone here. We need buy-in from everyone in this city. We need a buy-in from not only everyone in this county, but in this state, to say loudly that we are no longer going to allow people to speak for me. We want people to speak for us. We want people to speak for us as a collective, for us as a group. And what I also say is one person shouting has a very little impact to be able to change something. But if we are all chanting in unison, we are all singing and rejoicing out loud together, there is so much that we are able to change. So with that, I put this call out to each and every one of you to let's do this together. Let's fight together, arm in arm, hand in hand, to do something today to make sure that yesterday's past does not become tomorrow's future. And with that, I would like to say thank you again for having me. Appreciate being here.
I bet y'all have some things that you want to talk to these folks about. So I'm going to ask Allison to come back up here. And also Crystal, if you'd come back up here. And Louis is going to stay here. And I'm going to have y'all hold this. And do you have a microphone for me to take around?
I do not.
We can loan it out, that's fine.
No, just do this. When somebody says a question, if you'll just repeat the question so that people can hear it, that'd be great.
When somebody says a question, I will be repeating the question so that everyone can hear it. What's up? Yes?
Kind of been about provisional ballots, okay? And so my question is about how to get on a provisional ballot for it, because they're the ones who decide whether or not provisional ballot is this or not.
Okay, I am going to hand the microphone over this way, I think, because I'm hoping that you have a better answer than I've read about provisional ballot boards. The question is, can you tell me about provisional ballot boards? Is there a group of people who evaluates provisional ballots? Yes, I know that there is. Yes, I've seen the results of their action, and when they said that crystals did not count. But that's about all I know about provisional ballot boards, other than having read the statute. Here you go.
Okay. Thank you very much. So whenever it comes to provisional ballots, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. First and foremost, let's talk about what a provisional ballot actually is. So a provisional ballot are for voters who have some kind of questions about either their eligibility or their registration status. And whenever you fill out a provisional ballot, before you get to that point, you have to fill out an affidavit of provisional voter. That is something that the voter fills out, the election judge also fills out, and the elections department fills out too. But there are a lot of different processes in order to be able to get a provisional ballot. But a part of the issue that we get here whenever it comes to provisional ballots, and forgive me, I'll get to your answer, but I want to say something first, is that it is now a second-degree felony in the state of Texas to illegally vote in this state, which means that if you attempt to vote or if you knowingly try to vote in the state of Texas, is now punishable between either 2 to 20 years or 5 to 20 years. 2 to 20. Okay, I was correct the first time. Between 2 and 20 years. But whenever it comes to being able to process those provisional ballots, it's important to reach out to the Dallas County Democratic Party or also the Dallas County Elections Department, because there are multiple ways for you to be able to be involved to make sure those ballots are either counted or not. So there's the ballot board, there's also the central count station as well. So if you are interested in being involved, there are opportunities for you to be able to do so by once again either reaching out to the Dallas County Elections Department or the Dallas County Democratic Party. And by doing so, we can make sure that we're able to put you in touch with who you need to in order to actually participate.
Yeah, I live in Collin County, so we don't have any of this stuff.
But even in Collin County, if you want to be involved, there's an opportunity for you to be able to do so.
But even in Collin County, you know who votes there and has a residence there. So.
Are there any other questions?
So I am not old enough to vote yet, and neither are my friends, but we still want to be involved. What are some ways that kids can be involved?
So there are also student clerks. So if you want to be involved at a polling location, you can be a student clerk. So if you're interested in doing so, reach out to your county party. Also, reach out to the elections department as well, and they will be able to give you opportunities to be able to do so.
What's the age limit on that?
I believe it's 16. So if you are interested in being involved, please make sure that you reach out and we can have you be involved as well. You can also block walk for particular candidates. You can make phone calls. People are very sympathetic to people who want to be able to get a phone call from somebody to try to convince them to be like, you know what, I need to be able to vote. Also texting too. We need as many volunteers as possible. Block walking, texting, just volunteering in general. If you are willing to be able to give your time to be able to help get Democrats elected up and down the ballot, there are going to be opportunities for you to be able to do so.
So this beautiful young woman who asked the question in the back is somewhat familiar to me, as she is my oldest daughter. And I just want to let you know that when I was running for judge, she came out to poll greet for me. And she was exceptional at it until she immediately abandoned my campaign in order to poll greet only for Jasmine Crockett, who she loves more than anything in the world. So anyway, evidently her loyalty is for sale. Any more questions?
So, Crystal, when you filled out that provisional ballot, were you actively registered to vote?
The question is, Crystal, were you actively registered to vote when you filled out the provisional ballot?
So I came home in 2015, completed my time on federal. So it was Can you hear me? Okay. So it was November, and my mom was like, Crystal, it's the last day. I was like, Mom, I promise you I'm going to vote. Okay, I'm going. I was on something called supervised release. Supervised release, they give you your terms and conditions. They tell you your do's and your don'ts. Not drugs, not alcohol. You can't be around certain felonies, certain people that has felonies, unless you let them know, all of this. Nowhere did it tell me I was ineligible to vote. Nowhere. And that's what one of the star witnesses for the government, my supervised release officer, testified on the stand and said, no, we never told her. No, she never filled out anything. But yet I still was sentenced to 5 years. But to go back to what you were saying, I went in with my ID to the polling place. 16-year-old worker, he said, you're not on the list. And I was weird because I got like a half hyphenated name. This is where I voted. I voted the last time for in 2012. I've been in my house since 2008, so I'm at the right location. So I was kind of like, well, maybe because I signed power of attorney to the kids in the house to mom, I'm not on here. That's what I was thinking. So he told me, you can fill out something called a provisional ballot. And I was like, well, what's that? He said, if you're at the right location, it'll count, and if you're not, it won't. Well, that was simple to me. So the lady took my ID. She went somewhere. We sat on the table, and she just told me, make sure everything matches on your ID. And that's exactly what I was doing, and I filled out everything. And at that time, it was like you can do a straight ticket still. And I went, and I asked her, hey, where is, the Democratic Republican? And she told me that. She moved me out the way, and she showed me. That's what I did. I left, and that was the end of it. Later, I was called in by my supervised release officer, and she told me to come in. I'm thinking I'm just coming to do like a UA or something, because we don't report. We just pretty much fill out forms every month. And I did. I went in to report, and they told me I was being arrested for illegally voting. And I was like, but I filled out everything. That's what I was thinking. And they told me, you're ineligible to vote. And so I was trying to tell her that we can go up there and talk.
So a provisional ballot doesn't count until somebody says this is good. So how did she vote?
Girl, you are writing our brief for us. I mean, that was basically a provisional ballot is not a vote; it's an offer to vote. If she didn't, she thought she was registered, and that was the issue. She thought she was registered. There had just been some kind of typo. In point of fact, the Tarrant County Election Board had sent a letter to her house while she was in prison saying, we think you're in prison, so we're going to revoke your right to vote. They sent the letter, not certified mail, nothing like that. They sent it to the one place they knew she was not. And so she had no idea that she was not registered, or that they had bounced her registration.
Is it correct that an election judge signed your provisional ballot?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Still?
Yep.
Because the judge would have been the one to say yes or no.
It's not correct on my end. That's what he was supposed to do. The election judge is my neighbor right across the street from me. Never seen him there, so I know who my neighbor is. His name is Carl Dietrich. So I knew who he was. He never helped me at all. A lady helped me through the whole thing. But I found out that he was the polling judge when I went to court. And he said that he helped me. He also said I stood up and raised my hand and shook my head because he definitely did this in my transcript. And I was like, Carl, I know you. You're my neighbor across the street. You never helped me with this. But again, that's how it went. Mine was more of personal. Like I'm in a pretty predominant white neighborhood. And I've been there for a while. And I went to prison. And I went back and I still got my house, so... Hey, so that was it. The polling judge was my neighbor, Carl Dietrich, across the street, that never helped me.
He lied.
He definitely lied. And when I called the church where we went to, first thing I said is, I need cameras. Hey, when I found out everything, he's like, oh, the system was broke, everything. And it's all, yeah.
Well, what Crystal is not telling you is that the particular neighborhood that she lives in, her family is one of the only black families, and they've had a bit of static about that issue. In fact, one neighbor sits in a folding chair on his lawn with a rifle, yelling at her children. Some people poured cement into her water meter in order to turn off the water. Like, it's a problematic place, and the student poll worker knew some of her kids and didn't like them, and so they're like, things get personal and petty, and when you have laws that are vague, then it leaves them open to personal, petty, capricious enforcement and political enforcement, because at that time, Sharon Wilson, who everybody knows is a monster, you can quote me on that, was really, really trying to look for her share of the 3 million illegal voters that cost Trump the popular vote at that time. Many of us have blocked out 2018, but it was an exciting time. I mean, it was really, and as much trauma as it has done to the country, it has done that trauma individually to the people who have been used as political sport. And that's, the criminal system cannot be politicized because it's not a game, it's not funny, and it's real people's lives.
So are you aware of other people who cast provisional, that this happened to?
Yes. Yeah, the question is, are we aware of other people who have cast provisional ballots? And I want to tell you about Hervis Rogers, who voted in 2020. He was the last person in a very long line in Harris County. And he cast a ballot and was proud to do so. CNN was there, captured him on video voting at about 2 a.m. The moral to the story was, if you're in line, stay in line. The miracle's going to happen for you. You will get to vote. Well, that perhaps angered some people in Harris County. I'm not sure. But he got prosecuted for illegal voting because he had 2 weeks left on parole. Yeah, 2 weeks left on parole. Hervis Rogers, by the way, was actually registered. He didn't cast a provisional ballot, he cast a regular ballot because the county had registered him. He had a 25-year sentence. He had been out of prison for, 12 years at that point, a long, long time. And when Crystal and I heard about Hervis's story, I mean, we went down to Houston immediately and just came to rally the troops and say, we're here, and we're here to support you. Hervis was shattered. And it was actually Ken Paxton who was prosecuting him, somebody who had seen the CNN report, looked up Hervis Rogers because he had a weird name, and found out that he had 2 weeks left on his parole. And then Ken Paxton decided to prosecute him, not in Harris County, which, by the way, has protected itself just like we have, but instead in a neighboring county, Montgomery County. Now, generally, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the voting statutes do allow to be prosecuted in a neighboring county because most of the people who violate voting laws are candidates running for office in that county, right? And so if you've got, like, let's say Clay Jenkins did something irregular in a voting thing. Well, he can't be prosecuted here because everybody knows Clay Jenkins and everybody trusts Clay Jenkins and all of that. So moving it to Collin County or somewhere else would be the fair thing to do, right? Not for individual voters. Montgomery County, which is just outside of Harris County, is and has always been the hanging county. They use that county. It used to be where all of the sex offender things went, for just to make sure that we will never have to worry about these people again, because Montgomery County will take care of it, right? Anyway, so that is Ken Paxton's playbook. That's what he wants to do. He wants to go through our voter rolls and send anybody who's made a mistake to, Kaufman. No offense to Kaufman, but they know what they did. And in order to be judged by Republicans. They want to use that against the big counties because the war on the big counties is the only thing they think can keep Texas red.
I would also like to say one more thing about Harris County. During the 2020 general election, Harris County ended up trying to expand how people were able to access the ballot. They were able to have drive-through voting. had 24-hour voting to be able to give people an opportunity to vote and vote safely, especially during the midst of a global pandemic. People in the state legislature weren't too happy about that. So there was a very real and concerted effort to be able to target Harris County for even the smallest of issues, to be able to say this is justification why we need to be able to get rid of the elections administrator's office. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. Harris County no longer has an office wholly and solely dedicated to the administration of elections. Not because the office wasn't effective, but because it was personal. It was too effective. That is the reason why that office no longer exists. And so we also need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to be able to vote for the candidates of our choice, because what happens in Harris County, Dallas County is usually able to follow too. So we just also need to be very careful and concerned about that as well.
So just to be clear, if you have been convicted of a felony, but you are off paper, you have served your time, you're not on probation, none of that, you can still legally vote.
Okay, in Texas, so the question is, if you have been convicted of a felony but you're done with your sentence, can you vote? In Texas, the answer is absolutely yes, and there's nothing that you have to do in order to clear that. In Florida, you have to file some petition to be allowed to vote or something like that. Texas is not that way. And in many ways, that makes it more confusing because had Crystal come to me before she had voted and said, hey, Allison, I'm on supervised release after a federal conviction, can I vote? I would have looked at the statute that says if you've been convicted of a felony and you're off of probation or parole or supervision, then yes, you can vote. Well, is that supervised release? The statute really talks about state crimes and situations that happen in the state penal system. And so I would have said, I don't know. I don't know. And the appeals court has clarified that for us. Thank you. So supervised release counts. Before Crystal's case, nobody knew. No court had ruled on that. So the fact that the law didn't even really know that she was ineligible to vote, I think should have cleared her name immediately, but whatever, that's just me. But I want to answer your question. People who have been convicted of a felony and who are finished all of their sentence, who have finished parole, have to vote, because they are the folks that the system steps on the most. They are the folks that have been taken for granted and have been cast out of public life so much. And they're the only ones who can speak up for important issues like the prison system and whether we should put more money into it, whether we should have criminal justice reform. Those voices are needed in our public discourse. And so, I would say it's even more important for people who have had felonies to vote. But yes, if you're on deferred adjudication, you can vote, no problem at all. If you're on straight probation, you cannot. If you're on parole, you cannot. If you are in prison, you cannot. Do you know whether you're on straight probation or deferred adjudication? Almost none of my clients do. Misdemeanors, yes, misdemeanors you can vote. Absolutely. Nothing with a misdemeanor can stop you from voting. But it is confusing on purpose. But if you're off paper entirely, please vote. And there are a lot of voices and advocates out there like Unlock the Vote to try and really convince people that yes, it's okay, and really the discourse needs your opinion because TDCJ is the state's biggest department. The prison system is the biggest part of our government. So we need to hear from people.
I have one more provisional ballot question, and that is, what exactly is it designed to, what's the provisional part? Clearly,
Okay, so there are a few things. So everybody be patient with me as I try to run through this just a little bit. So you are eligible to be able to vote a provisional ballot for a couple of reasons. One being if due to a state or a federal court order, the polling location's hours are extended. So what we ended up seeing during the primary runoff were a lot of issues due to power outages at various polling locations. So the Dallas County Democratic Party ended up suing in order to be able to get a court order to be able to keep polling locations open. So during those hours in which the polling locations were kept open for an extended period of time, those individuals who voted during that window were eligible to vote a provisional ballot. Now, another reason why people will vote a provisional ballot is if they don't look like their ID. Now, their ID is there in order to be able to verify that that person is who they say they are. That ID is not there to verify address. That ID is simply there to be able to verify identity. So if somebody shows up to be able to vote and they don't look like their ID, that individual will be given a provisional ballot. Once they vote using the provisional ballot, they'll need to go to the elections department to cure their ballot. And to cure their ballot, they'll need to be able to provide documentation to be able to verify that they are who they said they were to be able to have their ballot counted. Now, those are just a couple examples, but another one would be if somebody requested a mail ballot, didn't end up voting the mail ballot, but came in person to be able to vote, but didn't relinquish that mail ballot and still wanted to vote in person. In that situation, an individual would also be eligible to vote a provisional ballot, and if the mail ballot was not sent in, the provisional ballot would be counted. So the real question is, what is the purpose of provisional ballots? Provisional ballots are there if there's a question as to your registration, identity. It's just you're almost look at it as like, this is my request to be able to vote, knowing that additional checks need to happen in order for the ballot to be counted. Yes. Yes. So in all honesty, there are also processes in place to be able to reject Ms. Mason's ballot.
I
There
have
are.
about 10 pages on that answer.
Yes, if you would like to speak.
Oh, no,
My neighbor called the DA person.
But there are processes in place in order to be able to have her ballot rejected. In the central count station, as all the ballots are coming in, it is very clear for us to be able to know, all right, should these ballots be processed and accepted or should they not be? So once again, her ballot, in all honesty, was not going to be accepted. So if that was the case, I have the very same questions and concerns that everyone up here does.
Most provisional ballots are rejected. Most provisional ballots are rejected. But none of them are prosecuted. Why? It's a question that only prosecutors can answer, and that at least one of them really needs to answer, but whatever. The provisional ballot affidavit starts with a statement that is almost always untrue. I swear that I am a registered voter of the precinct in which I am trying to vote. Okay. If that were true, your name would be on the list. You wouldn't have to vote a provisional vote, right? The Help America Vote Act established provisional voting and required everywhere, all over the country, to have provisional voting as an option, mostly to register people. So that if you cast a provisional ballot, it's like play voting, but at least you're registered for the next election. Because the Help America Vote Act was passed under an administration that, and I know again, this is going to sound like I'm like from the 1950s or something crazy, wanted people to vote and just wanted the franchise to be, wanted us to be more democratic and to have more people vote. So, you could say.
One more thing. So something else I'd like to point out whenever it comes to voting in Texas is the Texas election code. So as somebody who has the unfortunate life where I read the Texas election code, I'm going to also tell you this. It is unfortunately a mess. There's a lot of gray area, but there's also the unfortunate reality where people will just add in sections to the code without removing anything. They'll just add things in it. And there won't be any process to clean up the election code, to be able to rectify sections that end up conflicting with each other, but that is once again a part of the problems that we are all facing. The confusion is real, it is purposeful for a lot of different reasons, but that is also a lot of what we end up facing too.
One of the fun things, and I'm going to ask for your question in just a second, one of the fun things that we had to run across when writing the brief is that in the Texas Election Code, in its wisdom, nowhere in it is defined vote. We had a question, is a provisional ballot in fact a vote? And the statute had no help for us. It was a case of first impression, interestingly. Crystal's was. Yes?
Well, it's more of a statement as an election judge. Remember in 2019, the Secretary of State said they were cleaning up the voter register, and they erroneously threw a lot of people off the roll.
The word erroneously is so charitable, and we love that for you.
And I had a gentleman that had voted at the same polling location for decades, same address, same name, everything. And when he came up to vote in 2020, in the note section, when you come up on for the clerk, it said Secretary of State. And, he was a Trump supporter too. And he got blue gasket that morning, but he had to vote provisional. But I've also had like people that registered too late to be able to vote in that election.
Yeah.
Their beginning date on their voter registration isn't applicable for that election. They will vote provisional also.
Right, because we have a waiting period. We don't have same-day registration. Again, the legislature, in its wisdom, trying to keep people from voting. Yeah, Tina.
So, a little bit of a comment and then a question.
Yes.
So, I don't know if everyone in the room knows, but our Redeemer is no longer an early voting polling location. And many of the North Dallas people are used to being able to go to our Redeemer. Can you please tell voters how they can look up some of that in advance so that they actually go to a valid polling location?
So 2 things I want to be able to keep everyone in mind is that if you reach out to the Dallas County Democratic Party, there are active conversations between them and the elections department as those polling locations are being finalized. So as soon as the Dallas County Elections Department gets the list, we can make sure that you are able to get that list as well. Also, something that the elections department does do is that before every election, they also have it on their website, their early voting locations, and also the election day locations too. But they also have a wait time feature as well. Now, we may have issues about how accurate the wait time feature is, but it does provide some information as to how long the wait is at various polling locations. And if you need to be able to find out what polling locations are in a general vicinity or area, that feature also gives you an opportunity to be able to find out the polling locations there as well.
I can't recommend highly enough driving around and just looking for a bunch of campaign signs aimlessly. It works every time.
But also ask the question. That is what we're here for. If you have any question as to what eligibility standards relate to, whether it's like, all right, what do I need to know as it relates to voting by mail? What do I need to know if it relates to being a provisional voter? What do I need to know whenever it comes to, am I registered to vote? How do I register to vote? When can I register to vote? If I register to vote before the deadline, can I vote during the early voting period? The answer is yes, but if you were to ask, unfortunately, some election judges don't necessarily know that information. So if you have any questions, ask. Because if you don't ask, we can't possibly find out the best way to be able to help you. Yes.
So if you vote early and they say to you at the voting location, I don't see you, how about a provisional ballot? Is that what you recommend, or do you recommend another alternative?
I recommend a couple of alternatives. First and foremost, if somebody says that you are not registered to vote and you believe that you are registered to vote, please make sure that you call either the 866-OUR-VOTE hotline or you call the Dallas County Democratic Party headquarters and they will be able to look you up as well. Also, the elections department has their own internal system to be able to check and see whether or not you are eligible and whether or not you are registered to vote. There are a lot of different processes that are in place. And one of the benefits of trying to vote early is that it is not your last day to vote. There are other opportunities for you to be able to do so. And what I'd like to tell people is, if you try to vote during the early voting period and there's an issue, we can do something about it. Because worst case scenario, there is another day available for you to vote. But if you wait until election day to vote and something goes wrong, whether it's an issue with your car, an issue with transportation, your work keeps you long, that's it. I highly recommend you attempt to vote early, because if you vote early, you have options. If you wait until election day, there can be issues.
I think an election judge suggests to a voter to call that hotline, or does it have to come from an outside person?
I think it's very important in order to be able to provide voters with the resources and the information that they need in order to make sure the ballot can be cast and counted. So I would say yes.
But an election judge is required to offer you a provisional ballot.
Yes.
But they can give you the number, at least to the elections department.
Yes.
Correct. If I may, the election judge is supposed to call the election department and
Yes.
verify your registration.
Yes.
That's the first thing that can happen. The provisional is the very last thing that can happen.
Yes.
Like
I also want to be able to say this. It is not on an election judge to determine whether or not a voter is eligible to vote or not. Election judges and clerks are not there to be able to say somebody, you cannot vote or you should not vote. The election judges are there in order to be able to provide as much information as possible to the voter, so that way they understand whether it's a document that they're signing or they understand the process to be able to make a decision. That is the reality of it. It's important for each and every one of us to empower the people with knowledge and information to be able to make a decision for themselves as to what they do and when they do it.
So I want to say one thing what you just said. Vote early from the candidate perspective. It's a lot more expensive on us as a candidate because we're looking at data, we're analyzing data, we're having to meet. If you don't vote early, we may have to pay for another mailer to go to your house. We have to pay for another door knocker. We have to pay for somebody to call you to remind you to vote, because we're looking at that data every day. So the longer we can vote, the more expensive it is to get your vote. To add to what Tina said about our Redeemer, last year we had the First Baptist Church here in Richardson. The year prior to that, their only election was the First Methodist. Both of those churches have said they are not going to allow us to use them as voting centers. There were some things that happened. They chose not to. With that said, it's normally at City Hall. We're rebuilding the City Hall. So until now that free City Hall gets built, to this day we still don't have a place to vote yet for early voting. I have been working with Commissioner Summerman's office to try to find a place here in Richardson for early vote. We have not been successful, in all honesty. If you are a member of a large place of worship or know someone that has a large building, then please speak up, and we'd love to know what the options are. Every time we switch voting locations, on average, it's about 2.5% loss of vote. Now, where do you think that comes from? It's not from the other side. Those guys show up to vote no matter where it is. But it mostly comes from the Democratic side. And be switching two elections in a row and then another third, that's a lot of voting loss we have there.
To be fair, I think we can use websites better than they can, but maybe I'm just being...
I want to say something about the question. I have a question that I want you to talk to. If you know, I've heard that there's going to be another purge, or they're threatening purges between now and the election in Texas, and so can you speak to that? Is there anything like that that you know of? Have you heard of it? And also, at what point is it best to go on to something, log online, and make sure that you are registered to vote, so that you don't show up too late to register?
So first and foremost, I'm not aware of any voter purges that are currently about to happen or are currently underway. With that being said, once again, we all need to acknowledge the state that we live in. So that is also a very real reality. But I also think it is healthy practice to check routinely whether or not we are registered to vote. I do it myself. I go onto the Secretary of State's website. They have an online tool that you can use to be able to check and see whether or not you are currently registered to vote. Healthy practice And I would say do so once a month. Just click online to be able to see. But also I would say probably a month before early voting is supposed to begin, check again. Just check again. And tell your friends that, yes. Tell everyone to continue to check. Because check your voter registration status. Please do so. It is very important to make sure that you check. Because once we get past that 30-day deadline, that's it. That's it. Nothing, the unfortunate reality is nothing can really be done after that. So check to make sure, follow up, do your own due diligence. Because the reality is if we don't and we are removed, there's nothing that we can really do. And also one other thing, if you are someone who wants to vote by mail, please make sure you also do that as early as possible too. Because what we've also all experienced is that the mail does take some time. And if you are trying to send in your application to be able to get your ballot, to be able to send your ballot back out, and to have your ballot received either on election day, if it is not postmarked, or the day after election day, if it is postmarked on election day, it's going to be very difficult for that to be able to happen. So do things early as possible, because if there are any issues, once again, we can do something about it rather than waiting, unfortunately, until it's too late and we aren't able to do so.
And I wanted to also say on that, on the mail-in ballot, we got a number of people in here that are eligible to do mail-in ballots, and maybe that's just how you prefer to do it, or you know your friends that prefer to do it that way. It is made to, as Louis said, to fail. So if you know somebody that's going to be mailing in a ballot, get with them and help them get it. Point out to them how it needs to be done. Help them get the mail-in ballots done and done on time.
And your kids in college too.
True.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just had a comment, and several things you kind of covered in terms of checking. But one of the things when I was a judge, in many election cycles, we would have people come in and say, what do you mean I'm not registered? I registered when I got my driver's license. The whole driver's license thing is a major problem. So I would just say, one of my friends, her son was so excited, he turned 18, he got his license, he registered to vote, and I said, that's great, but make sure that he goes out there to check so that he's not surprised. Now, sometimes it can be fixed, again, back to your point, Louis, if you go during early voting, but I can't tell you how many people we had come election day that we had to turn away because they said, well, I did it when I just assumed it was good. I did it when I moved and changed my address and did it with my license, and it was not workable. So everybody needs to check.
I did mine in person at the voter center on 35, but I'm a voting nerd, so.
Yeah, I had a question on photo IDs. Last time I worked the elections, we were advised by the election department that you had to present a photo ID, but the judge was not qualified to say whether or not the ID matched you as you presented yourself. Because the statute didn't clarify criteria. So could you clarify that, whether or not that's something the judge can actually do?
And we actually are in Collin County too, so that may make a difference there.
Well, it should be the same.
Yeah. Well, your ID is there, and so forgive me for being delicate with my words. I'm trying to be able to say this as appropriately as I can, considering the fact the Texas election code isn't as nuanced as what we are talking about here. So, once again, your ID is there to verify your identity, not to be able to verify your address. Now, whenever it comes to someone showing up, if they don't look like their ID, they are supposed to get a provisional ballot. That's what is supposed to happen. And then they come to the elections department, provide documentation to once again verify that they are who they said they are, and then that way that ballot would be cured, and then the ballot would be counted. Forgive me for not addressing your question directly. The reason why I can't is because, once again, the Texas election code isn't that nuanced. So whenever it comes to whether or not a judge can determine an eligibility, it's a real matter of, like, does this person look like who they say they are or not? And that is truly the only way in order for us to be able to know if there are any issues which could end up leading to that person, like that person would need to cast a provisional ballot.
So what you're saying is because the election code is vague, it can vary from county to county.
Because the election code is vague, there is no concrete rule that every county has to follow. Yes.
They didn't get a license. Repeat that, Grandma.
Yeah, so to his point, he was saying that this is particularly a problem with trans individuals, and just unfortunately there are members of the LGBTQIA community that do unfortunately run into this issue. But I think it's also a couple of things are very important. It is not on the election judge or clerk to be able to ask them what their gender is, to ask them how do they identify themselves, to ask them if they're undergoing any kind of procedure to be able to verify that they are who they say they are. It is not on the judge or the clerk to be able to ask any of those questions. The only thing that the judge and the clerk should be doing in those circumstances is using that ID to try to verify that they are who they say they are. And if they believe that they are not, once again, they're eligible to vote a provisional ballot, and there are mechanisms in place in order to be able to cure that ballot so it can actually be counted. Yes, ma'am.
Vote by mail. So if a vote by mail application is rejected, a voter can call South County Democrat to assist them with the process of going through that. That's my question. My 84-year-old mother at the time had 2 mail-in applications rejected. The first one, they rejected and she provided them with the information they requested, and they still rejected the second one. Luckily, she had somebody who could drive her to the polls so she could vote in person. But I know there are a lot of seniors who do not. The first time there was, they wanted certain identity verification information from her. And the second one, I never really found out. She just got frustrated and said, just take me to the polls.
So one thing I do want to point out that the Secretary of State also created an online tool for an individual to be able to track their ballot and their application. On that online tool, it should also be able to provide that voter with an explanation for why their application or their ballot was not rejected. Was rejected, my apologies. Now, with that being said, on the vote by mail application, and I think I mentioned this before, you have to put a personal identification number on the application. Now, that identification number, for quite some time, needed to be the number that you used whenever you initially registered to vote. Initially registered to vote. And for a lot of people, that could be confusing. They don't necessarily know, did I use my social security number? Did I use my driver's license number? So my suggestion to everyone is always put both numbers. If you put both numbers on the application, it reduces the opportunities that it can be rejected for that reason. Now, I would like to also say this. In the event that somebody does apply for a vote by mail ballot, and they are not able to vote in person, but they also are not able to vote using the mail-in ballot, there is a process called an emergency ballot. It is not the most efficient process, but there are processes in place in order for someone to vote if their vote by mail ballot is rejected and they're also unable to vote in person. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Okay, so Dr. there's so many things that have come up. First of all, I want there to be a crystal law that says you're required to take into your personal hand whether you can vote or not when you get released. That should be a law.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
To be called-
100%.
The second thing is, the people who are on the ballot board who make these decisions with the provisional ballot, did they get elected? Are they appointed?
So there are, sorry, my apologies. I'll let you finish your question.
50 more questions.
Okay. So whenever it comes to the ballot board, those individuals are appointed by your particular county party. So they have members of the ballot board who are members of the Dallas County Democratic Party, but also the Dallas County Republican Party.
So there should be some kind of equal representation.
Yes.
There should be.
Well, I mean,
There should be.
there should be. Now, the reality is also this, the representation should also adequately reflect like the representation in the county.
But if there's like some individual that knows Crystal that's on there going, oh, I'm going to get her, they should refuse.
I mean, if you're going to hold a personal vendetta against an individual who's attempting to vote, you shouldn't be on the ballot board at all. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you, but they shouldn't be involved in that process at all. Most importantly, we are here in order to be able to make sure that ballots can be cast and counted and that everybody is able to do so safely and fairly without any kind of thoughts of like retribution or being targeted for any reason whatsoever. So I know you had additional questions, but that should not happen.
There should not be any jail for anybody attempting to vote. They can just say, you can't vote.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Because once again, there are mechanisms in place in order to have the ballot rejected. So
You can apply to buy a gun and fail and not go to jail for that. What's this? So anyway, the next thing is I have some experience because I had a kid that went out of state for college and did an absentee ballot and it failed silently because you can't get a driver's license. It's crazy. You can't get a state ID very easily here. It takes a long time. You have to make like get a 3-month window away from current time to get an ID. So she registered to vote with her social security number when she turned 18. Then she got a state ID. So she didn't even have a state number. She re-registered to vote with the state ID.
Making voting tough on college students is intentional.
Right.
It's
Then she
incredibly
got
intentional.
Then she got a driver's permit, and the number changed. You have to re-register to vote every time any of those numbers change. And they told us when we could not figure out where her absentee ballot request was in the ballot tracker, they rejected her because those numbers didn't match, because she registered social security number, and then she applied with her state ID number.
Yeah.
So they failed silently. I had to call, and I'm an activist. I'm going to make sure she voted. They finally sent it to her late, and she got it in and got voted. But it was just a horrible experience.
It sounds like you're a mom like Crystal's mom, making sure people vote. That's important. I just wanted to mention that during the pendency of Crystal's appeal, the legislature very much knew about her case. They changed the penalty for illegal voting down to a misdemeanor. And then Ken Paxton got really mad about it because it flew in the face of his nefarious plan to hold up a whole bunch more Crystal Masons, and then they bumped it right back up to a second-degree felony. So for 2 years, Crystal's case should have been a misdemeanor. But whatever. They also did make a new and retroactive law that simply signing a provisional ballot affidavit is not sufficient to sustain a conviction for illegal voting. And generally, you would think that that is the beginning and ending of this, but Tarrant County thinks that just signing it isn't enough, but also writing your name on it, that should be evidence, and then also the fact that you showed up to do it and were there, like, God bless them. They really bless their hearts. They just they won't give this one up.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question because we need to clear out. These folks need to go home, and I know it's dinner time too. So Susan Cooper has one more question.
Yes, I have a friend on senior living, and he would like to vote. He was wondering if maybe his VA card would be sufficient identification.
Okay, so
The question is, will a VA card suffice for identification to vote?
Okay, so as it relates to, so there are a couple forms of identification that somebody can use in order to be able to vote. They can either use a Texas driver's license, handgun license, Texas personal identification card, and as well as some federal IDs as well, which would be a federal passport, a book or a card, along with a couple of others. Now, with that being said, if somebody does not have one of those IDs and cannot reasonably obtain one of those IDs, then there is something called a reasonable impediment declaration. And whenever it comes to a reasonable impediment declaration, that would be a document that a voter can use that says, I don't have one of these IDs for a list of different reasons, whether it's transportation, work schedule, family life. There are a bunch of different reasons, and then there are supporting documents that somebody can use in order to be able to get a regular ballot using a reasonable impediment declaration. Now, I'm not 100% sure that a VA card is on it, but somebody is able to use a bill as a form of ID that they can use in order to be able to get a regular ballot using a reasonable impediment declaration. They could also use a student ID as well, a part of the reasonable impediment declaration ID, to be able to get, once again, a regular ballot. There are a few others. In the reasonable impediment declaration? I don't think so. Oh, okay. I'll need to double check. But yes, like a bill, a utility bill would count as it relates to the reasonable impediment declaration. Now, once again, if somebody is filling out a reasonable impediment declaration, they would get a regular ballot, not a provisional one.
But in the past, as recently as 2016, which I realize isn't recent, but as recently as 2016, at least in Bexar County, which is part of Texas, a VA card would not suffice as a document for the reasonable impediment. So what happened in a senior living facility was that the administrator of the facility wrote a letter with that saying this person is a resident here, they are unable due to whatever these reasons are, and this is their address, and this is my administrator's license, and then that was attached to their request for reasonable. But a VA card was definitely, and this is 2016, and I was in San Antonio at the time, but it did not work.
Now, once again, I would need to double check that. Before I hand the mic over to Jenny, I would like to say thank you to everybody for allowing me to be here. Thank you to Ms. Mason for showing up and being able to share her story, and I'll get out the way.
All right. Well, that was a robust Q&A. I'm so glad that everybody is really interested. If you have more questions, there are resources that you can ask. If you have things that you want to say to somebody that said a question, if you had other things you wanted to express, find somebody and express those things. I don't want to cut anybody off, but we have a limited time here. And I want to tell you, I saw your orange shirt, End Gun Violence. Next month, our happy hour is going to be in regards, we're going to be focusing on the issue of the right to live without the fear of gun violence. And we have the esteemed State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who is going to be joining us. He ran for Senate, and we are very excited about the fact that he's going to come and talk to us. That's going to be at 4 Bullets on August 15th. And just to go a little bit further out, please put September 21st on your calendars, because we are going to have James Tallarico coming to speak with us that month. It's a big get, you guys. He's he lives in the Austin area, and he's kind of blowing up on social media. Quite the warrior against Christian nationalism and for public school funding and the right to a public education. So please put September 21st on your calendar, and August, and it's going to be we're going to be at Richland College that day in a 450 seat place. So everybody come and bring 5. Anyway, so that's going to wrap it up for today. I think Johnette has one more thing.
Just one announcement. We have been working on a postcard, and I know some of you are postcard volunteers. We're going to be sending a message out
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for remembering that. Am I forgetting anything else? George King is going to be at our both meetings coming up in August and September. George King is running for the State Board of Education. He is quite the warrior for the State Board of Education. We need him there. So please support him. Look forward to hearing from him the next couple of months. And thank you all for your engagement. Please get in touch with anybody if you want to work at the elections. And go with God.